here in the West, in our modern culture, we seem to think of things as being disconnected and not related to one another. So when it comes to menstrual cycles, it's like that thing that happens to us. It's a bit of a nuisance, and it's not really seen as something that is really part of our entire wellness in a very holistic way. Yeah, and it's really important, actually. It's like a vital sign.
We have this way of, I guess, describing women's health in stages. And I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't really know much about these stages. I remember when I got my first period when I was 12, and I was on an aircraft. I was flying, somewhere, and I was like, oh, what's going on? Nobody ever told me about this. And now that I'm like, in my 40s, I'm thinking, gosh, my body is changing so dramatically. So can you kind of like tell us a little bit about the stages that a woman goes through according to, Eastern practices?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So I like to talk about it almost like a continuum. It's little kind of stories that happen and journeys that happen along your whole journey, your whole menstrual continuum, and they're all intricately connected to one another. So things that happen kind of, at menarche and through menstruation and pregnancy and fertility and postpartum really do influence how you experience perimenopause and menopause. They're all connected on this like one story, and it's just kind of these journeys along the way, and they're all influenced by each other.
Yeah, they're like you said, it's all connected to nature. And the more that we understand nature, the more that we're like in our element of just, embracing nature, we begin to experience this like innate ability to realize that,
Yeah.
okay, there's an ebb and flow with who
Yeah.
we are as humans and as women who menstruate. So, I remember you posting or commenting on a post some time ago about how, Western medicine doesn't really view food as something that is like evidence-based. But you, in all of the courses that you teach and everything that you really like, the content that you create, you have like this really interesting focus on food. How important is it that we eat the proper foods when we are going through these different cycles in our life?
Yeah, so this is another area where I feel like things are just so fragmented in our modern culture, and thinking that food has absolutely no influence on our well-being and health. So, in ancient times, it was absolutely crucial that individuals really kind of flow with the seasons in order to thrive, in order to survive. And so now in our modern culture, we kind of feel like that's not an important aspect of health, and it very much is. So when it comes to food, these are the actual kind of building blocks in order to be able to have the possible nutrients to even have our mechanisms work properly. So food is crucial to overall health, wellness, overall wellness. Yeah.
Well, overall health too. They're
Yes.
both, it's interchangeable. I get what you're saying. And another thing too is that what really gets me is the birth control. There's so many different types of birth control out there, and I think this is a really important topic to touch on, because a lot of women, or a lot of just people who menstruate are being given birth control to control either blood clotting or pain, and it's just like, there's a better way to do this. And so I remember growing up, that was the first thing that was recommended to me. And so I went on the Depo-Provera shot for like 5 years. And it wasn't until I started diving into Eastern medicine and realizing that, whoa, what am I doing? I'm stopping my body from menstruating for forever, pretty much, for as long as I'm on the shot. So, how much is birth control affecting our reproductive organs and our hormones? And, what are some things that you could recommend, or what would you suggest in place of birth control?
So birth control is exactly for that. It's to help control birth or possible birth. And so in the right context, birth control is really helpful, especially for individuals, in countries where they don't have, a say in their birthing and having choice with that. So it's actually really empowering to have a choice like that for birth control. I think where it gets a little bit dangerous is when it moves beyond the scope of birth control and it's used as just kind of a blanket slate. It's like, oh, you're coming in for painful periods, let's put you on birth control. Oh, you're coming in for heavy periods, birth control is the answer. Birth control doesn't regulate periods. It hacks your system, it controls your system, and your bleed that you have on birth control is not an actual period. So essentially, it's kind of mimicking a body to almost function as male physiology, but in a woman's body. And so that kind of miscommunication month after month after month really does something to your entire system. And so if you read through the entire, pamphlet that they give you, there's so many side effects that happen. And in the realm of Chinese medicine, this cold introduction of this pharmaceutical impedes circulation. It introduces cold phlegm, essentially. So it's like very viscous to all of your veins and blood cell, everything in your body just kind of slows down and gets kind of clogged up. And that's not beneficial for health.
That definitely resonates with me now that I know what I know now.
Yeah.
So, you have this passion about this aspect of our health. And in Eastern modalities, when you approach like further education or when you finish, school, you either take an approach of going down the, women's health or you go down general practice, which is addressing pain. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you actually ended up, creating or cultivating this passion in this area of Eastern medicine?
Yeah, so I think for me, my mom's from South Korea, and so I was always kind of exposed to, herbs cooking in the kitchen, just adding astragalus or dates kind of in like chicken soup or something like that. So I think very kind of sensorially, I've been exposed to just the knowing of different ways of approaching health. And I remember distinctly my mom talking about the blind acupuncturist and how everybody goes to see the blind acupuncturist because their senses are just so on it, Yeah, but I think what kind of drove me to pursue it, like actually as a career, was when I actually experienced my own kind of health challenges, being a preteen and having this kind of sudden thing happen to me where I had to go to the emergency room and subsequent surgery and coming out of surgery like, oh, you have this autoimmune condition, And so immediately I was put on, steroids and all the concoction of all the things the doctors suggested. And I was on that for like a really short time. My body did not feel well. I did not feel well. And my mom was like, get her off of those things. We're going to manage stress. We're going to approach it with food. And so, yeah, I was never on like pharmaceuticals to kind of manage an autoimmune condition. And so I think as I got older, I just kind of knew that that's the route that I wanted to go. It took me a while to get there, because life happens. But I got there, and it's the best decision that I ever made. I would say when I kind of picked my kind of speciality or my focus and my passion for like menstrual health and the menstrual continuum was when I was actually in school and I was pregnant twice during actual acupuncture school. And so I lived it. I experienced kind of how Eastern medicine had this really radical approach to a pregnant body's health, and how they viewed birth and all throughout all the months of pregnancy, and how postpartum is crucially important to the health of the mother, the health of the baby, the health of the family, the health of the community, and and beyond, and how it just has this like kind of concentric circle influence, and just how that was really emphasized. And I was like, I'm in this. I was like, I want to do this. Yeah.
I think you were probably the first person that introduced me into the evolution of creation of life, because I was born in a hospital, and I don't have children, but when I look at all of the things that you talk about, and you talk about how important it is to have going through postpartum, and maybe even having a natural birth if you can. You're the one who turned me on to like encapsulating your placenta, and I'm like, what? I never heard of that. And so, and also you turned me on to other things like hydrotherapy, peri-steam, and I just thought, wow, this medicine is more deeper than I ever thought it was.
Yeah.
I really love how you take it that much further, and I feel like more women are becoming more turned on to this, because it seems like Western medicine is just like, oh, we're just going to have a cesarean, we're just going to cut you open and take the baby out, and you're going to be okay, when there's actually something that happens during that birthing process that is not only sacred, but it's also for the health of the baby that's being born. So that's like a whole nother like aspect.
That's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Completely. So, there are terms that you bring up that are so eloquent and so poetic in the way that you describe women's health. And I like to go over them before we actually get into like the actual, meat and potatoes of the session. So could you clarify, what does it mean when you say Jing essence, or when you refer to our Jing essence?
Yeah, so Jing essence, I think, put simply, is kind of like ancestral medicine. And I love how poetic that is. But essentially, it's like the most dense kind of makeup of your being. And so it's a culmination of two things. It is like your ancestral kind of lineage, what you bring into the world from your past, your parents, your ancestral lineage. You can kind of think of it as like DNA, right? But then the other part of it is post-heaven essence, which is kind of like how you live your life, your lifestyle, your work habits, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, nutrition and movement, and all of those things. So those things combined is like your essence, your Jing. And it really reflects kind of the trajectory of your lifespan, your aging process, your development, and so forth. And so menstrual blood, sperm, these are all reflections of Jing essence. And so when you kind of think of it in that context, and how precious it is, you kind of see your menstrual blood and sperm as like this extra vital sign. And then you kind of think like, well, I do have a menstrual cycle every single month. How can I care for my essence? How can I care for my body in a very Jing-centered way?
Wow. You see what I mean by poetic?
It's like poetry, right?
Poetry.
But, yeah. And so I feel like the language is so important, right? And so when you see, and it's all about context and framing. And so when you start your period and you have this framework of understanding, like you need to hide it, it's shameful, it's going to be painful, it's going to be a nuisance, it's a burden for the rest of your life, and it's something that happens to you every single month, you kind of carry that with you. You carry that language with you. But imagine if you were celebrated, if you're monarchy, like, and it was celebrated in saying that, you're starting your cyclical journey, and it's something to actually honor each month. Yeah.
I think that would just really change our perception as women. You're like, whoa, I'm powerful. I can give birth.
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
something to celebrate, So let's every practitioner that I work with has a very interesting way of describing chi. And I would love to hear your explanation based on, the practice that you are passionate about. So how do you describe what chi is in this context?
It's difficult actually, because how we translate it really easily over here in the West is like, oh, it's energy, but it's so much more than that. It is like, it's like effervescent. It's like a mist. It's something that touches, but you can't see it. It's this kind of driving force, but it's like it's so hard to explain, but it's absolutely essential for existence and for health. And you can have a relationship with your chi, with your energy, if you want to call it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words, but the Chinese language is like pictographs, right? And so like chi is like an image, it's a picture, it's an experience. And to kind of say it, as like a very linear way of like it's energy, like it's bigger than that. It's yeah.
I agree. I agree with you that it is an experience, because there's so many different types of chi. There's chi, the essence. There's, the primordial chi, the Jing essence also is like a form of, chi and energy. And our emotions are also affected by this type of chi that we either cultivate or, create. So you're right. It can be described in so many different ways because we're that much of a dimensional being. So I appreciate it.
Very dynamic. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about, what does it mean when you say jade gate? What is our jade gate?
Oh, yeah. Let's jump into that. Jade gate. So the way that I approach, and what I do is really kind of educate. And my whole passion and purpose is how to kind of switch the paradigm in conversations around menstrual health, vaginal health, breast health, and really put it into the hands of my clients so that they can take ownership of it. And so when you talk about things in a very clinical way, it doesn't sink into the bones, right? But this is where language and poetry and so forth can kind of seep in and really. And so jade gate is just another way of saying vagina. And vagina is like, it's a very kind of clinical sounding word. And it actually means like sheath or something where something goes in. And so when I was naming my course, I really wanted it to be a bit more approachable. And so jade gate is, a Chinese bedroom arts term.